Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about a murder case regarding a young girl, an 8-year-old girl, and it's honestly one of the more disturbing stories that I've read in a while, and we're going to be talking about two of honestly the most disgusting people I've read about. So let's get into it. The father. This guy's name is Nguyễn Kim Trung Thái, and he's a Vietnamese man. He was born in 1985, so that makes him, this year it makes him 37 years old, and he, up to a few years ago, it felt like he really did have everything. He married his wife in 2012, and they had a beautiful family. And she was the same age as him, and when they married in 2013, they had their first child together, a young girl, and we're going to call her VA. I've seen some websites that just outright say her name, but just out of respect, I'm going to call her VA. In 2016, the wife got pregnant again, and she had their second child, a boy, who is known just as VA's younger brother. So the father worked in marketing, and he's very skilled. He was always pretty high up in whichever company he decided to work for, always working as either marketing director or some sort of directorial position in the companies that he worked for. He seemed to have it all. He had a good job, a good paying job, a perfect little family that he just built. He was someone who commanded a lot of respect. A lot of people, after this whole situation happened, went back and interviewed some of his colleagues, and they say that he was always in good standing with everybody in the company that he was working for, which since last year he's been working for a company in Ho Chi Minh City, which is the largest city in Vietnam. He'd been working there for a short period of time, but during that time he's built up a great relationship with his colleagues and is well respected in the company. Everything started in 2020 when he met Nguyễn Võ Quỳnh Trang in that company. We're going to call it Company E because that's what it's been referred to in some of the articles that I've read. And she was quite a bit younger than him. She was born in 1995 in Gia Lai, which is the central highlands of Vietnam. And she moved to the city a few years ago to work, and she worked pretty closely with him. She was directly underneath him, like in the ladder, so she was a direct subordinate of his. He found her very attractive, so they started having an affair. This is when his marriage sort of disintegrates. A lot of accounts have said after this point that it was because he had started to drop hints that he was having an affair, and then the couple, him and his lover, eventually came out to her in an argument, and they had a really nasty fight. The wife didn't know how to deal with this information, and she was so broken over it, so depressed over it, that she one day decided to take her own life. And fortunately it wasn't successful, but this did cause her to end up in a hospital, and she was in the hospital for quite a bit. During that time, he probably told his parents, because in the time that the wife was in the hospital, his parents went over and talked to her parents and told them that if they couldn't live together anymore, that they should live together. They should tell their daughter that she needs to get a divorce with him. And he was also, this is all happening while she was still in the hospital recovering from her suicide attempt, he basically threatens to take her 2 children away from her if she doesn't give him a divorce like he wants. She, of course, buckles under this pressure, and she divorces him in August of 2020. This is only a few months after their affair started. As soon as they get divorced, he moves into an apartment in Saigon Pearl, which is a luxury apartment complex in Ho Chi Minh City. He moves into a luxury apartment with his new lover, his new girlfriend, and what ensues is a very, very nasty custody battle. He promised that he was going to fight for both of the children, and he made good on that promise. He gave a bunch of reasons to the court as to why he should have sole custody of both of the children. He cites the fact that the wife doesn't have a very stable income because she had decided to be a stay-at-home wife to take care of her family and take care of her kids, and so he says that basically she doesn't have any money, so she's not financially stable, and also she is mentally unstable because he cites her suicide attempt, and he says that she isn't fit to take care of either of the children. But in the end, the court grants her custody of the younger boy, so VA's younger brother, and VA is told to go and live with the dad, who is now living with the lover in his luxury apartment. Along with VA, she has always had a caretaker a female caretaker who's an older lady, and this is a pretty normal thing for young kids in Ho Chi Minh City to have caretakers, where when their parents are busy with another child or they just can't handle the workload or whatever, they'll often employ a caretaker for one of their children, one or more of their children. And this older lady was VA's caretaker, and she came along to live with the dad and his new lover. At first, according to caretaker, everything was great. The stepmother now, because VA starts calling her mother or stepmother. So at first the stepmother, when the caretaker was still there, she never outwardly showed any sort of hostility to VA. She was very nice to her. But the stepmother and the caretaker had some sort of falling out, or she didn't like the caretaker since the beginning. A lot of people have speculated that it's because it's a remnant of the husband's old family, and for some reason the stepmother just didn't like the caretaker, and she starts to make life pretty hard for her, starts to complain to the dad about this caretaker, and she also posts a few Facebook posts complaining to her Facebook friends. And she has a lot of Facebook friends because she has a huge social media presence. She's always posting photos online. If you go look at her Facebook page, her Facebook profile, which is ironically still up right now, but she says that she's lazy, she doesn't have a great work ethic, and then get this, she says that she doesn't know if the caretaker, when her and her boyfriend are out of the house, she doesn't know if the caretaker beats the girl. Now, this caretaker has lived with this girl since she was very young, so it's very unlikely that she had abused this child, and the dad or the mom before, or even now, the stepmother wouldn't see any sort of signs on VA if the caretaker had been abusing her. But she sort of puts that out on the internet. She gets some sympathetic comments saying that, oh my gosh, you should fire her, blah blah blah, and she does that. The caretaker has to go back to her home for a few days for some reason, and after she came back to the apartment, the stepmother had thrown all of the caretaker's things out. Basically says, you don't work for us anymore, I want you to leave. According to many accounts, this is when the abuse started to happen. Now this woman, she sort of takes on the role of teaching VA because there's still COVID restrictions in Vietnam during this time, and so most of the classes are online, and so she takes on the responsibility of teaching VA and also just caring for her since she doesn't have a caretaker anymore now. So first of all, she starts to write a list of things on a whiteboard. These are your chores for the day, and she makes her do a bunch of things around the house as well. Like she makes her wash the dishes and clean and all of that, but she also starts supervising VA's lessons, and in order to discipline her if she feels like she's acting out of line, she bought it's basically a whip. Most of the times it's made out of bamboo or something. It's used to like whip animals sometimes, and little kids are misbehaving. We call it like rai mai. It's like made of very flexible material that if you flick it, it'll flick. It's very flexible, it'll flick, and it inflicts a lot of pain, a lot more pain than if you had used like just a normal stick or something. Anyway, she buys this off the internet to discipline her lover's daughter with, and if she failed to do the things that she listed on the whiteboard, or if she fails to understand the lesson quick enough, she will whip her. And immediately you think in your head like, okay, this woman has a whip and she's hitting a child with a whip. That's child abuse. Like, you can call police on her for that, but it's not really that simple, especially in Asian cultures. I'm sure you've heard of this word before, but tiger parent. They don't view disciplining children physically as much of a taboo subject. They often don't view it as child abuse, because this is their mentality that I need to teach my child very strictly, because if I don't teach them, they're going to grow up repeating this harmful behavior or whatever, and the world will teach them, or the law will teach them, or life will teach them in an even harsher way than me. But this only works if you care about the child, if you're not doing it out of spite and you're doing it to genuinely teach them a lesson. But this woman just seemed to really love to beat on this poor girl, because she beats her so much that this whip, this rai mai, it breaks. And especially rai mai is normally made out of very flexible material, like most of the times bamboo, and it's super hard to break. And so the fact that she breaks this whipping this child, is just absolutely insane. And it shows you how often this abuse happens. After that, after it breaks, she starts using just household objects. Like, she uses a broom at some points, she uses her slippers, she uses her bare feet to kick the girl. And at this point you're thinking like, why is the dad allowing this to happen? Like, why is he allowing his lover to beat his own daughter in this way, to abuse her in this way? And he has said himself, since this whole thing happened, that he knows that she would teach her a lesson using this sort of method, but he actually doesn't really care. He doesn't do anything about it. Sometimes he even partakes in this sort of abuse, and he will see her beating the kid because she fails to learn the lesson or whatever, and he will start beating the kid herself. According to many sources from VA's biological mother's side, he never used to be like this before the divorce and the whole custody battle. He used to be a very good father, a very gentle father. He never hit her. But I'm not sure if it has something to do with how bitter and how contentious the custody battle was, or if something happened, but he turned into this really abusive father after he was with this lover, and he became complicit with her in all of this abuse. But everything comes to a head in December 22nd of 2021. On this day, VA was at home alone with the stepmother. The dad had gone off to work from 2 p.m. in the evening to 6 p.m. The stepmother was trying to teach VA some subject in school, and VA wasn't picking it up as quickly as the stepmother wanted, as usual. So she starts beating her. She starts beating her with various different objects. The main weapon that she used was a 90-centimeter wooden stick, like a round wooden stick. And she just starts beating her with this 90-centimeter wooden stick. She beats her on her butt, on her back, on her head, on her forehead. Obviously, this child can't take this, and there really must be something psychologically wrong with this woman, because I just don't understand how you can do this to a child and not feel something. Since then, there has been some reports that say that this woman suffers with some sort of mental illness. It's not been confirmed yet, but anyway, after she beats the child, she ties the child up. She ties her hands and feet up with rope, and she forces her to kneel, continues with her lesson while kneeling. And obviously, when your hands and feet are tied and you're kneeling and you're tired, obviously you're not going to be able to learn anything. And so this makes her learn even more slowly, and her attention span gets even worse. This stepmother, she uses her hand and slaps the girl across the face. When she falls down, she unties her, forces her back on a chair, forces her to continue learning. And this sort of pattern of behavior happens over a span of 4 hours, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. And when the girl is back on the chair, she gets angry again, and she uses her feet to kick her off the chair, and the girl falls on the floor. And then she takes her and puts her onto the bed. And at this point, the girl is complaining of breathing problems. She can't breathe. She's very, very tired. She has bruises all over her body. And once she's laid down on the bed, some sort of liquid starts coming out of her mouth. She starts vomiting, basically, because of all of the attacks on her body. Only then does this woman stop beating her, takes her into the toilet. She isn't responsive anymore. She's basically passed out. Only at this point does this woman call the father and say, hey, your child's passed out. And the father rushes back home, and he finds his daughter unconscious in the toilet, and he starts doing CPR on her, and stuff is just coming out of her mouth and out of her nose. And so he takes her to the hospital. At the hospital, she is pronounced dead on arrival. And obviously, when you look at a child with bruises all over their body and dried blood all over their body, you're going to immediately think child abuse. So the doctors in the hospital called the police on this couple. And first, they charge only the fiance with abuse, and the dad is allowed to go free for some reason. At this point, everything in that house is a crime scene. You need to hand everything over to the police. And they had cameras in the house. They had cameras in the room where the woman was teaching the child. The dad is allowed to go home, and instead of handing the camera footage to the police like you're supposed to, he tries to delete the camera footage and sort of cover up for his lover, knowing that his daughter had just died from this woman's hands. He was unsuccessful in doing so. They were able to recover everything, but yeah, just speaks to the character of this guy. Then they conduct a post-mortem examination, and this determines that VA, the 8-year-old girl, had suffered a hematoma under the skin on her forehead, and also she has sustained cerebral edema, which is basically fluid retention, and broken ribs. Just shows you how horrific and how vicious this woman was to her. If you look at the photos of this girl, as soon as she gets rushed into the hospital and post-mortem, it's just so horrific. And since then, there's been information that's released that she also had significant damage to her private areas. So a lot of people have theorized that that woman had been hitting her and beating her in that area as well. And on top of all of the fresh new scars and bruises and wounds, there were also scars that have healed over. And since her death, a lot of photos have come up on Facebook where people can see like bruises on her arm, bruises on her leg. And her biological mother is also called in to identify her daughter. And due to just the horrific circumstances surrounding this situation and how young the girl was and how bad the injuries that she sustained was, somehow the picture of her when she was at the hospital, taken at the hospital, got leaked to a few media outlets and they picked it up immediately. This story just absolutely blew up in the media, which just caused an outrage that the fact that the dad wasn't charged with anything when he was aiding and abetting, and then later we found out that he was actively sometimes contributing to the abuse that was happening in his house. This story just got so large that the prime minister weighed in on it, and the vice prime minister actually weighed in on it, and he sort of called for the arrest of the dad as well. Since then, Stepmother's charges have been bumped up to torture and first-degree murder, and the dad is also being investigated for aiding and abetting in a murder, torture, and covering up for a criminal. So they're both in jail right now awaiting sentencing and a trial and everything, but they're looking at years and years, rightly. A lot of people think they should get the worst penalty because in Vietnam we still have capital punishment for severe crimes. They're both looking at timeframes of 12 to 20 years in prison, 20 to life, or the death penalty. Those are the three brackets. But anyways, they're going to be spending a large majority or up to the rest of their lives in prison for this crime. But the details that have just emerged after the post-mortem examination and after this whole story broke is just absolutely heartbreaking, especially because they portrayed such a outwardly happy facade on social media. There are pictures of this young girl and the father happily kissing the stepmother, and they seem like such a great happy family. A lot of the stepmother's colleagues have come out saying that they can't believe that she did this because she came off as such a kind, caring person. She would never hurt a fly, and they can't believe that she could do this to a child. The stepmother is just absolutely evil, and there's no words to describe what she did, but I find the father just honestly even more disgusting and despicable because it's a common stereotype that stepmothers and their stepdaughters or stepsons don't always get along, but that's your own daughter. How can you let another woman treat your own daughter like that? A lot of people have speculated that something happened to him after that divorce because he seemed to just do everything to spite the girl's biological mother. He would berate her and stop her from seeing VA. They allegedly only were allowed to meet each other 2 to 3 times a year. There was one time where the mother came to VA school to meet her because she couldn't go to the apartment where the dad and his lover was living because they wouldn't let her in, and he texted her and berated her. He was very, very angry about it, sort of forbade them from seeing each other, and he's just so cruel to his own daughter after that, to let another woman treat your own daughter like that. I've never heard of anything like it in my life. It's just so disgusting. Yeah, it's just a really sad story all around, and I hope they get a severe penalty for what they've done. That's it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.